Houston, can you hear me loud and clear? Good afternoon and welcome to webinar 11, Handling the Emotional Highs and Lows. My name's Laura Thompson and I seem to be not alone in finding the last couple of weeks a little bit more challenging than some of the more previous weeks. So it inspired us to have a think about how are the professionals trained to deal with some of these emotional extreme highs and extreme lows that some of us might be experiencing. We're going to be joined later on for the third by my wonderful work wife, as I call her, Debbie Green, who will be giving us some practical tips based on some of the common themes that she has found are emerging that are unique to this particular part in our lockdown timeframe. So without further ado, I will share the screen and here we go. Okay, so look at this picture. Just what would it be like to be up there for months and sometimes years at a time? This is the International Space Station. It's been up there for a while, and in fact the profession of astronaut is probably about 80 years old now, so there is a lot of data and a lot of research about what it takes to be the type of person that is attracted to and can handle life up in space. I loved this quote. Most people here don't have a wide emotional range, it's just the type of people astronauts are. They're required to be level. Now, I never signed up to be an astronaut and I haven't been trained to be an astronaut. So what value might it be from understanding the particular training that some of these extreme roles go through to help me handle the emotional highs and lows? These sessions, for those of you who enjoyed me on previous ones, are designed to help keep our professional skills sharp, maintained and ready for action on the other side, regardless of current workspace or employment status. It's about emerging better than potentially when we went in. So just imagine here we are walking down the jetty to a submarine where potentially you are going to be submerged for months at a time without the ability to even see the weather around you. What's been fascinating in the much of the stuff I've read is that one of the things that people in the highs and the depths of our universe, of our globe, really miss is the weather. Because if you're up in space, you're above the weather. If you're under the sea, you're too deep for weather. And it was Winston Churchill that said that of all the branches of men in the forces, there is none which shows more devotion and faces grimmer perils than the submariners. And it's been fascinating to look at some of the knowledge and training they go through. For we are being tested in ways that we were not selected or trained for. Experiencing sudden reduction in choice can really create some emotional highs and lows. Our ability to self-regulate emotion enables us to cope with strong feelings, and I've just got a feeling that this decade is probably going to be testing some of those with some ups and downs, so keeping emotionally level will be a valuable skill. Exploring how professionals are trained to deal with the heights and the depths might help us boost our own emotional resilience and also the impact we have on others around us. Teamwork has come out loud and clear in all the things I've been reading in terms of close proximity living. So what is the goal? The objectives of this particular webinar? As always, it's judgment-free, one size fits one. It's new for us all, so ditch the stuff that doesn't work for you, keep on board the stuff that does, always rooted in commercial practicality. So what lessons now might be useful for maybe some of the ways in which we need to work in the future? The three objectives are hopefully give you some practical suggestions to guide your thinking and to help us thrive whilst working from home in lockdown, no matter how makeshift or temporary our space. And today we're going to look at what is the general purpose and role of emotions anyway for a successful life, exploring strategies to handle the impact of confinement, lack of privacy, isolation. And then we're going to hear from Debs on some practical tips that you could start this very afternoon for regulating everyday emotions if they feel like they're a little bit more turbulent than you normally might be. So objective number one, and before we start, it doesn't really matter how good I was at this before, for me to be foxy in all of this. It's about recognizing this is a new environmental set of conditions. So if I were to channel the fox mindset here of forever learning, keeping broad and adaptable, nature would show to us that I don't have to be the smartest or have been the best in the past at handling stuff like this. It's my ability to have my rate of internal change match or exceed the rate of external change that means that I am still fit for this evolving environment around me. So not time to be a panda, time to embrace my fox mindset. So how do I use emotion to be successful during this current period of challenge? Look at this photo here. Even thinking about being in a space like that for months at a time makes my jacket sparkle. And in order to stay calm in high stress, high stakes situations, according to Chris Hadfield, who is a really articulate astronaut, done lots of talking about this, all you really need is knowledge. You're going to feel nervous, stressed, hyper alert, but what you won't feel is terrified. So what we're going to hopefully do in these next 3 bits here is extract some knowledge that can help us stay as grounded as possible, as potentially we are looking up and down an unprecedented situation. So the first thing, let us trust the purpose that emotion has in our survival kit, and indeed the very role it has in being human. Emotions are the associations that are generated from our senses, so it's data. I feel warmth, and so therefore I experience relaxation. I feel heat, and therefore I experience maybe tense and being on edge. So the emotion is the story that we put around the data that our senses perceive. We have a myriad of emotions here, and you might be experiencing just this in one morning alone in terms of going from this is amazing to I'm completely helpless. So just even looking at the vast colour wheel we have of emotions is a reminder of how it's perfectly normal to be feeling a bit up and down at the moment. In fact, it is universal. The facial expressions of basic emotions such as joy, disgust, anger, fear are totally universal. So I'm able to depict what is being felt in this picture, even though I might be a different age, cultural background, don't even speak the same language, but I understand from their facial expression how they're feeling. And I too have felt that too. Moral emotions are a bit more cultural. So things like blame, shame, guilt, etc. might depend on how I was raised as to how you might react to something different from myself. The function of emotion is to get our attention and demand a response if it's determined that something is at stake. Sometimes, though, these emotions call us so loudly that we become engulfed and overwhelmed by them and they take over. However, I found it really interesting to just read up about how emotions are fleeting and therefore is different from mood. So a mood could last hours, days or weeks, but an emotion is fleeting. So just because I felt a complete lack of competence 2 hours ago doesn't mean that I am sort of stuck with that mood for the remainder. Indeed, emotions are fleeting and different from personalities, which is the lifelong set of traits that predict someone's behaviour. Hence, it's used to recruit. There'll be certain types of people who will be more comfortable in some of these extreme conditions than maybe someone else. So unless we all had a personality assessment before we went in, we're only really discovering now whether actually our set of lifelong traits lend itself to the experience we're in. So just because I'm feeling something right now, I'm taking the logic from this is don't think about it too much. It doesn't mean you're going to be like this in 10 years' time. Mission teams are carefully selected based on their emotional as well as technical and social skills to develop and maintain relationships. I can see this being a key skill area over the next 3 years. It's not that it always hasn't been, but it's worthwhile just reminding ourselves that the purposeful disruption of emotional harmony on board with a mission team will be considered a disciplinary offence. So my role within the team is as important in terms of keeping harmony as it is being able to do the technical job I was hired for. And that's sticking with me in terms of some of the things to think about in the future roles we might find ourselves in. Second thing, using technology to remain tethered. This word tethered really rang out for me. The more tethered I feel with the outside world, the more grounded I feel. Maintaining strong social and familial connections is key to astronaut well-being. For decades they've been researching this. So up there on the International Space Station, there are specific support services put in place solely to maintain the astronauts' feeling of tether being tethered to their normal life. So things like weekly private meetings, receiving care packages from home, so receiving stuff, hosting their own web pages. They can use a cell phone to make calls anywhere. Music and playing musical instruments is a key feature to keep sane up in space as well, and being able to entertain yourself and exercise. However, even candidates who have been selected and are familiar with these situations, NASA recognises the risk that some of these isolated conditions can have. So much so that there is always an onboard set of antipsychotics, antidepressants and physical restraints. And I wanted to add that just to remind us all that these conditions do test even the most experienced of humans. So the third bit, if this was planned, we would have been trained specifically to have handled this couple of weeks. And this has really brought me comfort. This is probably what we're in, what researchers would call the third quarter, where teams are prepared for the predictable decline in performance of missions in isolated confined spaces. And so if you imagine now the period of time that's elapsed, there's this sort of feeling that we're over the worst and heading towards the next phase, and this brings its own risk itself. So within this time frame where we feel like, oh, it's known as the third quarter, so we've got loads behind us, we've still got some in front, but we're in this kind of chunk here now, is known to bring around a lot of rowdy behaviour, lots of conflict. And even though we don't know exactly when we're going to be coming out of this phase, Antarctic research teams are trained to be able to handle what they call the A factor, the Antarctic factor, which is we know we're going to be exiting soon, but we've got unpredictable exit conditions because we've got to wait for the sea ice to melt. In fact, Ernest Shackleton's team had to wait, I think it was nearly 500 days waiting for the ice to be able to melt for them to exit. So they knew they're going to be exiting, but that ability to sit with that, of course, they were selected and trained for that. So this amazing book written in 1985, looking at human requirements for extended space flight leading up to the Mars mission that they're preparing for now. They're still planning to set off in 2030. And where that's going to be really testing the boundaries of human endurance is it's going to take 44 minutes to make a return call. So where that's different from submarines and satellite and space, etc., where actually you can make an immediate connection, it's going to take minutes to be able to make an emergency call. And what they're seeing is that there are 3 stages of reaction to prolonged isolation. Heightened anxiety at the start, that sort of settles into a bit of a low. That means we can get a little bit sort of down and depressed. And then we get into the outbursts, the rowdiness and the fights on board. So especially if there's alcohol involved. So we might be feeling like we're in that kind of third stage now. Now, here's the thing that has brought me some comfort. When they're asked, would you go back? 100% of astronauts say, hell yeah. 50% of Antarctic research expedition teams say yes. Now, why do people want to go back, even though at the time it might be quite grueling? It's because they now know what's important to them in life. And findings suggest men are more likely to use social support as a coping strategy compared to before they went in. And women have an increased trust in their own abilities. So based on the research, men emerge less insular and women more confident. Now, won't that be interesting to see how that emerges in some of the behaviours we see when we get back to some kind of new normal in work? So, massive topic. Key thing is a bit of knowledge sometimes can help you steer a little bit more confidently. Trust the purpose emotion has in your survival kit and the role it has in being humans. It's not a positive, it is a positive to feel emotion, even if that's a negative. Use technology to remain tethered with the outside world to stay grounded, and plan how you might handle the specific challenges that are unique to this bit right now. It's not that you're not handling it, it's just we haven't been trained to handle this particular bit. So, second objective, how do the professionals handle the impact of confinement, lack of privacy and isolation? Well, I can assure you, doing a Google image search for submarine hatch has absolutely made me appreciate looking out the window. Look at this, you go in there, you come out potentially a year later. Can you even fathom what that must be like? So listen to this from a chap who's written a book that was published last year after emerging three months from being in a nuclear submarine. Here I was standing up, drinking in huge gulps of fresh air down into my lungs. It was the best feeling in the world. So let us never underestimate the ability to smell fresh air. So, making your place a sanctuary. So what come out from reading the stuff from submariners is that however tiny your space, So on these bunks, their nose is touching the bunk of the person above them. And in fact, there is a shift pattern for using these bunks. So even your own bunk is not permanently yours. So when your home becomes your whole world, it needs to reflect the world that you want. Censor incoming communication that is going to disrupt you. So sailors on board, their information that comes in, it's censored in terms of anything that might disrupt their mental state. Bad news is saved until they emerge because it's too much to handle in that space. Keeping your space clean, neat and tidy to remove the visual stuff that can clutter and stress you out even more. A team routine with shifts. It's Tuesday, it must be chicken. It's Friday, it's pizza, it must be Friday. Meals that rotate, variety. So food becomes a big thing, life on board. Time sharing the space if you have no privacy, and knowing when your moment of refuge is coming can really help relieve some of that pressure that might build up. And of course, exercise. Everything I've read says about exercise. So the second thing, be bigger than the emotion by processing it little and often. I think Debs is going to talk about this in a bit more practical detail after, but what's come out from the heights and the depths jobs is instilling habits to channel and process emotions while they're still relatively small, to avoid them building up and then becoming an overwhelming. So check this out. This is called Simon 2. And Simon 2 is an onboard, emotionally intuitive robot that was launched in December. And it's been launched up there to the International Space Station to help astronauts to have a friend, a private friend, and to be a peacekeeper between astronauts if there's something that's kind of kicking off a little bit. Such is the importance of being able to talk out even some of the littlest things. So that'd be interesting to see where some of that technology takes us. Writing it out. So right from the Neil Armstrongs and the Buzz Aldrin, of which this is one of his journal entries, the act of writing out emotions to be able to process it through. And Chris Kelly, who's one of the more recent sort of astronauts, has written about how if it gets a bit repetitive, so got up, looked at the earth, went back to bed, then actually writing more about what your 5 senses are experiencing or about memories also helps organise thoughts, clear minds and solve problems. So there we go, talking it out, writing it out before it becomes too big to be able to come down easier. And the third bit with this is never underestimate the power of a window to reset our emotions. Changing your view to refresh your senses and generate a new set of emotions is something that you would have been trained for had you been knowing you were going to be going into a confined space. Check out this view. So this is called the Coppola. And the Coppola is a 360-degree window that was put on board the ISS about 10 years ago, specifically to have positive psychological impact. This window has its own rotor, so the astronauts have a strict rotor, so you know you have a chance to reset, reflect in private, and to be able to clear your thoughts and change your view. So, how do I handle the impact of confinement, lack of privacy and isolation? Well, at least I'm not going into a submarine hatch. This is going to be at the back of my mind. Make your place a sanctuary, as this place means everything during confinement. Be bigger than the emotion by processing it little and often. And never underestimate the power of looking out the window to reset emotion. And often astronauts, from what I've read, have said one of the things they missed was the weather. So that natural variety that nature gives us. So, big topic. What I thought we would do to mix things up a little bit, and she's always a font of wisdom, is my wonderful BFF work it wife, Debbie Green. So hello, Debbie Green. I'm going to stop, Debs, the screen share to be able to unmute. Okay, and so Debs, you're going to give us some practical insights that link on with this. So I'll unmute you now. Hello, Debs. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello. Hello, everyone. How are we all?
Hello. How wonderful. So, Debs, you've had many conversations since all of this started with lots of people from all sorts of different industries, professional, personal, and I'd be intrigued, though, what have been some particular common themes that have been emerging these last couple of days?
Yeah, just as you said, Laura, there's been a roller coaster of emotions that people have been going through from moment to moment. But the 3 things that are sort of coming out that are common to most of the people I'm speaking to is the anxiety or anxiousness. There's that feeling of being overwhelmed as well by whatever's going on. And also this bored or fed up as well. They're bored with it, fed up with the news, don't want to know what to do next. So there's sort of the three key themes that have been coming out as I've been talking to people.
Yeah, wow, gosh. Okay, so you mentioned anxiety. What have been some of the tips that people have said to you they've found genuinely useful?
Yeah, as we sort of work with people and understand a little bit more about what that feeling and what that emotion is, and the first thing really is to just breathe and just stop for a moment and just recognize that that feeling exists. And that's okay, because it's your emotion. So accept it for what it is, because there's something going on for you at this moment in time. And then to ask yourself those three brilliant questions that I know lots of people will probably know, which is that bit: is this helping me right now to think and feel that way? Is it logical? And actually, is it true? And because it's yours to own, and it's what do I want to do with that emotion next, really. So it's that ability to be able to connect, talk to people as well, and that you're still okay. And what I found is that just talking and breathing and just taking a moment and exploring what that feeling is and what that emotion is for you really helps people to just understand it more and then know what to do with it if they want to.
Just take some deep breaths in as you spoke, then I already feel more relaxed. Thank you. Now, you mentioned overwhelm. So what does overwhelm mean, and what would be some practical tips people said they found useful?
I think what people are feeling, they having to deal with their schoolwork, children, they're having to deal with partners that they may not have necessarily seen all the time, they're having to deal with juggling work, loads of calls, no calls, having to go shopping and queue for 2 hours. There's so much going on with people at the moment that they can't see anything that makes sense for them. So the first thing we normally say to them is just slow down. Just, again, it comes back to that tip about just stop and breathe and think about what's your routine, what's your structure that you've created for yourself. And if you haven't, how do you start to sort of put a structure in place that enables you to just slow it down and take back the control and then move forward just one step at a time. And then we do a little bit of that reflection that goes on. So just, as I say, take a moment and just reflect on what you are doing, not what you're not doing. And also we introduced Gail on the call on the webinar a couple of weeks ago. So that ability to just be grateful for one thing, to acknowledge what you've accomplished, the one thing you've accomplished, to be able to think about how have I improved from one day to the next or one moment to the next. And also, what am I learning about myself? So going back to your journaling, oh my God, that's your gift to yourself. So journal is so important to just offload those emotions that could be whizzing around in your head and just slow it down for a bit.
Wow. I'm going to ask you an off-plan question. I'm just intrigued. It was really fascinating me about what the research is suggesting is the way that men maybe handle situations like this compared to women. I'm just intrigued. You know, you've had many conversations with all sorts of people. Is there any particular things you've picked up about maybe how men deal with things like this different from women?
No, that's what's really interesting is that they're feeling exactly the same. It just might take them a little bit longer to articulate the emotion or what the feeling is, because they don't necessarily connect with the feeling because they're not doing anything. So, but once you unpick that and you get them to actually acknowledge what is that feeling? Where is it? Where does it sit? What is it? And then boom, it just goes, and then they just flow. So there isn't any difference, actually. Everybody's going through the same emotional roller coaster. But that bit about stopping and breathing enables you to just take a moment and think about what can I do.
Yeah, wow. So even the presence of emotion, as we found out at the start, is universal. It's part of being a human. Wow, right. So you mentioned being bored and fed up. Hopefully not on this webinar, Deb. But what tips would you say you would have people have found useful that they can enact immediately if that is something that is an emotion they're currently identifying?
Yeah, that was one that has just started to come in. I think, as you said, the floor at the beginning with loads of stuff going on and being ready. And now as it's going on, there's a bit about I'm bored, I'm fed up, I don't know what to do, I'm hearing the same stories. And actually this is about just, if I was to say, just how do you change your state? So what can you do differently that just mixes it up a bit? So if you've been really good with your routine, because again, that's really important, but there are elements that then say, you know, what can I do differently? Can I go out for a walk like somebody did yesterday in the pouring rain and loved it because they took a moment to just look up and then just look around them. So they were very mindful around what was going on for them. They could, you know, what did they see? You know, what did you hear? What can you feel as you change your state and do something different? Music is really powerful at this time. So there's more music being played in people's houses and homes, and it just breaks that, changes your state in order for you to just add something new, maybe into your routine, or something that you would like to have a go at that you've never done before. So it's within your gift to be able to make a choice as to go, yeah, I'm going to give that a go. Or, yeah, I'm going to write, I'm going to draw, I'm going to listen to different music. I'm going to listen to a podcast I've always wanted to listen to and not. And it just enables you to explore and ask yourself some questions. You know, what is it that's causing me to feel bored and fed up? And what can I do about it? And talking to other people, I know loads of people are doing team activities, and that helps because people are looking forward to something. So it might be the quiz night on a Friday, or drinks all together on a Thursday evening, or dance classes on a Monday night. It just enables you to look forward to something which again changes your state. So you can't feel bored or fed up because you're doing something different about it.
Yeah, wow, gosh. Thank you so much, Debs. Key takeaway message?
I think I was looking at your themes was around, and I love this quote that I found actually, which is about, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So how can you just take one moment at a time and just think, what could I do? One thing that's different to what I am doing. And as we said, just to breathe, just stop for a moment and breathe, gather your thoughts, acknowledge your emotion, and then go, right, now what? So you can move forward, as you said, rather than stay in that mood forever. It's a fleeting thing, but you need to be able to know what to do with it.
Oh, nice one, Debs. I'll tell you what, the tattoo trade is going to be bouncing after this period, isn't it? I mean, the amount of motivational mottos we're all coming up with, we could cover our bodies in it, I think. So, wow, thank you so much, Debs. I'm going to remute you. So that's Debbie Green from WishFish. And I shall then get, thanks, Debs. So I shall then get back to our screen share. So thanks, Debs. Managing anxiety by acknowledging, accepting it's okay to be anxious and then challenging it. Reducing overwhelm with routine. GALE stands for each day a chance to reflect, what am I grateful for, what have I accomplished, what have I improved upon, and what have I learnt. And the benefit of that is it allows you to tally each day by making it count and just stop and breathe. And if you're bored, fed up, then notice it, choose how to switch it, and then move, do something to switch it up. So thanks, Debs. Hopefully some useful tips to help regulate our day-to-day emotions and maintain as level-headed as possible through this. So to wrap up then, isn't this wonderful, this quote? The first day, this is from an astronaut, the first day or so we all kept pointing to our countries. The third or fourth day we were pointing to our continents. And by the fifth day we were only aware of Earth. So where so much has melted and all our boundaries have changed is that recognition of, you know, we're kind of all in this together. And this period of transformation is testing us in new ways and developing strengths that you wouldn't have even known that you had ever needed, because these are extraordinary times that we're in. We're having to learn to be able to help ourselves emotionally in different virtual ways. So the hugs and the handshakes and the little pats on the shoulder, all those things we used to naturally do to convey or calm emotion, those soothers are no longer here. We're having to do this with words and thoughts alone, and voices. Our ability to self-regulate develops in childhood. So without adding another stressor, we are also teaching the future workforce on how to cope with strong feelings, because children learn by observing that they can only be what they see. And so as this decade is likely to be requiring us in the future to handle ups and downs, being able to consciously think about how we keep emotionally level now will only be of value in the decade to come, whether that's professionally or personally. So look at these, Stonehenge. You can see them from space, apparently. How incredible is that? Laid down by a human hand 5,000 years ago. Think of all the ups and downs and the highs and lows and the conflicts and peace times that these stones have seen, and yet still they are there, a big indicating part of our environment here. And there'll be pillars and values that are really core to you that will forever be. But there may just be an opportunity to fox things up a little bit by thinking, how can I constantly use my emotions to be successful right now and in the decade ahead? I wasn't selected for this, I wasn't recruited or trained for this, but here we are. So how can I then be effective with my emotions and handle these highs and lows? How am I going to handle right now the unique impact of confinement, lack of privacy and isolation? And actually thinking strategically, where could this be useful in the future in terms of working well as a project team, maybe in less typical conditions? What small daily habits, thanks Debs, could I start to use to regulate how I feel? So I emerge with even greater emotional resilience than before we went down the hatch. And my final bit is, having done so much Google image searching recently and seeing that submarine hatch, never will I take for granted having a window and being able to smell fresh air and being able to experience weather around me. So keep human, stay foxy. It's been a pleasure to see you again. My name's Laura, and I'll see you at the next webinar. And keep emotionally level, whether at the heights or the depths. I wish you well. Thank you.